Welcome to tonight's episode of the TFD Performance Podcast. I know what you're thinking. What the heck? That does not sound like Jordan Sullivan. Correct. It's Lauren, the expert dietitian. Plot twist, Jordi is our guest today. Jordi, hello and welcome. How does it feel to be a guest?
Evening, Loz. You are for sure reading off notes. Are you reading off notes to do that intro?
Are you serious? No way. I did not read notes at all. I 100% only practiced it twice in the car.
I remember when I first started the podcast, like years ago when I first did the Fight Science podcast, I would stuff up the intro so bad every time and spend so long in post edit trying to like edit it all out and make it sound nice. But you smashed that, so good work.
Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah, that's what you get for bagging me out about rehearsing. You know, it probably would have been even better had I rehearsed it possibly maybe an extra few times.
That's it. But you're taking the reins tonight. I'm going to leave it to you, Loz. You take over.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, anyone that follows you would probably know that you just did something really hectic whilst you were over gallivanting in the States. 100 kilometers on a treadmill. Can you, like, why? Honestly, just how did this come about?
Yeah, it's 100 Ks overnight on a treadie the night before Volko fought. So it was the night of his weigh-in. So it was like a long couple of days with the weigh-ins the night before and then the fights the next night. But the way it came about is that I guess I was training. I was meant to do a 100-kilometer race up in Noosa here in Queensland in March, at the end of March. And then obviously I was away for these fights with Kai France and Alex Volkanovski. Yep. And me and Kai have worked together for a long time. And when I decided to do the 100 kilometers and I said, okay, I'm going to register for this and do this and commit to this training, I thought if obviously I travel a lot for work. So I was like, if these certain athletes need me to be there, and it was only three of them that have done a lot for me and helped me a lot. And I said, you know what, I won't do it. And it was like one of my best friend's birthdays that weekend. And I said, stuff you, I don't care. I'm still doing this thing. I'm not training this long. But I think, yeah, quite a while into the training, I think Kai got the call like the end of January or whatever it was. And he said, hey man, like got a title eliminator fight. We're going to have to go to Columbus, Ohio. And I was like, oh, what date is that? And he was like, oh, it's like, it was the weekend of the race or something. Like he was fighting March 26th, and I'm pretty sure that was the exact date of it. So all that training, and then had to go over with Kai, and then Alex wanted me to go over as well. So it ended up being like a nearly month-long trip.
Yeah, that's pretty hectic. So you were training for an ultra. How long? You said you got the call in January. Obviously, 100 Ks you had been training for a little while. When did you kind of start training solely for this event?
So solely for the event was October last year. That's when me and my coach Krista got together and she said, look, if you're serious about doing it, like you need to do a very structured training program. We need to peak you right and build up all these things and get the volume and whatnot. And that was in October. So by the time I got the call from Kai, I was 5 months deep in that training block, which is a long time. And then even before that, there was a good 8 months or so of training to get to that point. And it was I guess that 8 months there was probably a lot harder because I'd never done any running before that. So all that training up until that point was kind of getting me ready. And before we'll get into it, I hadn't even run 10 Ks. I ran like my first half marathon. I ticked off like 25 and then 30 and then ticked off a marathon. And that was all relatively quickly. And then so like within that 8 months, I kind of became a runner. And then she was like, well, if you want to do the ultra marathon, you need like 6 months of ultra marathon training. And I was like, oh crap. So yeah, it kind of started at January last year. And then ultra training was October.
That's pretty impressive. Because I mean, you know, like, yeah, I dabble in running every now and then, but I don't think I've ever run more than 10 Ks. So for you to kind of go from, you know, not a runner to then running 100 Ks within, say, just over a year, that's pretty epic.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, right? Like, sure. I think that's something that I kind of underplay a lot, but it's a lot of training. Like I was training a lot more than like a lot more than what our athletes train.
Yeah, like what was a typical day like for you in terms of that lead up? Obviously, you know, you'd have deloads and different training days and different types of training, but kind of on average, say how many Ks, how many hours a week would you say?
So Ks, I think we worked up to about 150 to 180 Ks a week at the highest point, and it was pretty far. Per day, like a big day, I'd be doing, say if I was doing like a Saturday long day, you could be training up to 6-7 hours. But then like during the week, I'd usually do about 4 hours a day. So 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, or I'd do a longer run and do like 3 hours in the morning and then 1 hour at night. But this is the other thing is like the running is only one part of it. Like the running is just one part of the training. Like the other part that I like did not take as seriously in any other sport that I've done was, you know, all the strength conditioning and all the mobility and the recovery work. And like running, because it's such like we call it like a single skill sport, but like there's a lot that goes into it. But it's not like MMA where you got to master like all these different disciplines and you're every night. So one night you're doing jiu-jitsu, then you're doing Muay Thai, then wrestling, and then MMA sparring, whatever. Like running, you're just running. You're obviously doing like different tempos and different paces and whatnot. Yeah. But you're essentially working the same muscles over and over and over again. So like getting that recovery right and then getting your body to a point where it's strong enough to support that volume and then slowly increase it was something I didn't really respect that enough. And at the start, when I started, you know, in January last year, I got some really bad injuries that made me like sit back and be like, fuck, I got to really take this seriously and like start doing that. So like a training week, yeah, it was a lot of volume in actual running as well, but it was like so much, or it still is, it's so much in terms of strength conditioning and in terms of like recovery and then doing active mobility and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned obviously the running is just one part of your training, but I feel like the 100K itself, you know, it's not just the running. I feel an event like that, regardless if you did it, you know, actually in the sunny coast or you did it on the treadmill, I feel like you could break that down into, say, the physical side, the mental side, and then probably, you know, the nutrition and hydration side of things. So if we kind of think about this 100K on a treadmill, let's break it down into that physical side, the mental side, and the nutrition and hydration part. What do you think was the hardest of those three to nail, do you reckon? Like, or what kind of took you by surprise?
You definitely practice this, eh? You sound fun.
I'm just a natural, Jordi. Gosh.
I was going to say, you were way too natural at this for your first time. I was so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, that's why I'm part of the crew. I'm just a natural.
That's a good question though. So physical, mental, and then like the nutrition side. So I guess, like I was saying, like the physical side was hard because I hated running, and that was a big part. And I guess we can go into why I started to do running, which is like a bit of a weird, probably not on brand type story but we can talk about it. But like the physical was hard. That was like very appealing though, that I didn't know how to run. Like I didn't know that much about it. Running for me was just something that I used to do when I was cutting weight for jiu-jitsu comps. Like I wouldn't even know how to run. It was like 4 kilometers I'd run. I'd be like in a sweatsuit or whatever, and I'd run around. Like it was like a 4K block as fast as I could, and it would be horrible, but I just do it to cut weight. And like, so I hated running. I just absolutely hated running. Yeah. I'd never really run more than, I think the longest run I did was like a 10K when I was like 18 or 19 or something like that. But so like the physical side of it was hard because you had to change your entire body. Like my body was more built for like martial arts. And like, when I say that is like, my ranges of motion and my strength and my hips and everything was like essentially for me wrestling or kicking or being on my back and putting people in submissions, which is a very different range of motion than what it is like running on the pavement. Yeah. And I don't think I respected the sport of running as much as what I should have for how complex and how technical it really is. Because like I said, when I first did it, I started running, I had this thing happen that we'll dive into. It happened. And then like the next day I went out and ran like a 10 kilometer and then it was pretty good. Like I did a pretty good time. It was like for first off the gate, it was like 45 minutes or something, which was pretty good for like someone who's never run. And then like, I think it was like 6 weeks later, I managed to do 21 Ks, like a half marathon. And then like 2 weeks after that, I branched it out to 25. And then 2 weeks after that, I went to 30, and it wasn't that long. I think by March or something, I'm pretty sure it was by March that year, I'd run a full marathon, but I hadn't done any physical training. I didn't do any like strength conditioning. I didn't get like my technique or any biomechanics assessed. Yeah. And I gave myself like really bad ITB syndrome, really bad. And I remember being on this run and like it feeling like someone shot me with a shotgun in my hip. Like, and I remember this pain, and like, I guess this will go into the mental side of it. Yeah. It taught me a lot of the mental side, but like, my brain didn't know how to handle that. It didn't know how to handle that pain, and it didn't know how to compute how much further I had to go with that pain. And it was one of the worst experiences. Like I got it done, but it was a lot tougher than what it should have been because I didn't have the mental strategies to deal with it.
Yep.
2, I had terrible running technique. My shoes were not what I needed. Like I was running in shoes that were like way, way, way too small, and my feet were compressing, and like I was having all these problems with blisters, and my nutrition and hydration, everything was off because I had no idea. But I've been doing it for like, I was doing it for like what, 8 weeks or something. I had no idea. So the physical, I guess I went off like a firecracker and then just broke myself. I just completely broke myself, but which was kind of good. Like, what's that weird bird of Harry Potter when it like, is it the Phoenix and it like rebuilds itself? Is that?
I'm not, too up
Harry
on
Potter fans are going to be kicking me because I got that wrong. But like, that's what it was kind of like. I just like slaughtered myself in this thing. And like, in hindsight, it's probably good because it gave me a lot more respect for it as a sport. And I was like, this isn't just like what every other athlete does to stay fit. Like this is a serious thing. Like, and you need to take all these other things serious. So physically, that's when I like reached out and got a coach and was like, had to go get like a biomechanics assessment and be like, okay, well, what happened in my body that I got this ITB and this pain, and what happened like in my gait, like what's going on? And is there things that I can actively work on to improve my running technique? And it turned out like most people, like my glute was weaker than what they should have been. Like both my glutes and then my hips throughout different stages of my running gait were a bit off, and I had to spend a lot of time just like building up and working that. It's like I kind of went back to, it was like in my mind, it was like being a fresh white belt at running, which is and just building back up and learning it. And it was just like, it became a lot more fun though when I did that, and the physical side became more fun because like I'd always just gone out, like I said, and run. Like, and I think most people just go out and they just run. And then once I kind of got told like, you need to do like different pacing, and you don't have to go out and run as fast as every single time, and work on this type of technique. And then this day we're going to do a tempo run. The physical side kind of took care of itself pretty fast. And I feel like having an athletic background, I'd say having an athletic background, but I've always hated endurance work. Like that's another reason I want to do it. I was always like the sprinter at school, and I remember running cross country and stopping halfway and just like walking and being like, I'm not doing this. So like developing as much as you can develop your VO2 max, but learning about that. And then, okay, how does that, working with your pacing, how do you keep a good technique and keep a good pace and keep your breath? But then how can I do this for 2 hours? Like when I started, that was crazy. But the physical side, once I got the technique, I got like shoes that were actually, fitted and whatnot. I learned how to run properly. Like I learned how to breathe. I started going to the gym and doing running specific strength conditioning. I started doing, crazy amounts of mobility to get like the right amount of range of motion and movement that I needed for running. It went pretty fast, and I wouldn't say I got really good at it really, really fast, but I feel like I just committed to it completely. So the physical side, it became really fun. But then I guess like the next part of it was like the mental. And I think that's what attracts a lot of people. But I'll let you talk because I'm blabbering.
No, that's a good point. And I think as well, especially like you said, you just got out there and you would run. And I think, even myself trying to get into the triathlon scene, you swim, you run, you ride. They're things you learn as a kid, you just get up and you go for a run, or you hop in a pool and you swim. But when you actually look in a bit deeper, it's crazy how much goes into it. Like you said, the biomechanics, the skill, like, for me, doing a snatch, I feel like that is a lot of skill, and, you learn all these different techniques. But then going for a run, you think, oh, I'm just going for a run. But when it gets to, your level, you're running 100 Ks. If you're not running properly, obviously you're going to start getting those injuries or have those problems. So I think it's a good, for people especially that probably don't run, they would see running as, okay, cool, just going to go put on my shoes and go. But there's so much more to it than that, what you mentioned. It's pretty hectic.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And I think it's fine. And a big thing I struggle with, and this is going a bit of a segue, but I'll bring it back, is like when I started running, like I'd always look at everyone else that was out there running, and I'd always be like, oh shit, like she's going so fast, or he's like so fast, or whatever. And like I'd always be like comparing myself to everyone. But then like after time now, like 2 things have kind of happened. Like you don't really do that now because one, you're so in your own head and you're working these mental strategies, and 2, it's so silly because like unless you're in part of a run club or you're all part of a team and you're all in like the same training program, this guy could be doing tempo runs. This guy could be doing like his seriously slow run, or he could be doing his recovery run. You just don't know. So it's like I feel like that trips a lot of new runners up too when they go out and they see these people just like sprinting and going crazy. They're like, am I meant to be doing that? Like, should I be doing this? Or like, and it's like, no, like everyone's kind of doing their own little thing. And like, these guys are just short distance runners, and these guys are like middle distance runners. And these guys are like I can even tell like these guys are the Ironman athletes or the 70 point, athletes. And then, these guys are like the ultra endurance guys. You can tell because the way they're pacing and running and what they're doing. So it's like, that's another thing. Like I really not struggled with when I started, but it like took me a long time to get my head around is like, well, fuck, like everyone's kind of just doing their own thing. And what I want to bring it back to is like, it's so important to get a coach and get someone who's looking at your biomechanics and even just giving you advice about shoes and, how much mileage should you get in there? How much mileage should you be doing each week? Like what paces should I be doing for like, if I'm following this 80-20 principle or whatever, what pace is my 80% and what pace is my 20%? So it's really important that one, you get a coach and get someone guiding you in that. And two, you just realize like everyone is at their own different stage with it.
For sure. All right. So far in the podcast, for people that are listening, key takeaway points so far: 1, get yourself a coach; 2, get yourself some good shoes; and 3, don't compare yourself to others. Just stay in your own lane, literally.
Yeah. I could go on about shoes. I'm kind of torn on shoes, if I'm being honest, because I've seen when I started all this, I went through a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
Before I found my coach, Krista. Like Krista Fletcher is she's probably one of the biggest reasons that I've been able to continue to do this, because she's so good at what she does.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she told me that really helped me out, that I struggled with because I got told the complete opposite by 4 other coaches, or they weren't my coaches. I never took them on board. But they told me, like I had 2 of them tell me that I'd never run longer than 15 kilometers. I'd never be able to do a half marathon. And the reason being is like my biomechanics. And I was just talking to someone about this, like boxing from a young age and skipping so much. I have such tight soleuses and gastrocs. And a part of it is hereditary. Like my dad and my brother both have them. Like we have terrible range of motion in our ankles. And most people know, like if you do that test when you go up against the wall, you put your toes up against, you try to get your knee to the wall. Like you're meant to hit a certain number to be able to run. I do like the worst of the worst. I went to a sports podiatrist, and he pulled all these other physios in the room. He was like, look at this guy. Like he can't do this. It's crazy. Like he wants to be a runner. And I was like, fuck, I was like sitting there, like, come on, dude. Like the hell. And then I had another guy be like, yeah, you're never going to be able to like do these distances because biomechanically, your body doesn't work. Like it doesn't work properly. And then once I found Krista, she had a totally different take on it. Like her being a runner herself, but she's like got that sports background, and she just did these analysis, and she said, well, what's really happening is like, it's not so much that you need to strive for this perfect technique or look like you're running like world-class runners. You just need to figure out how your body works and then biomechanically make it sound to injury proof yourself to be able to do what you need to do. And for you, like an ultra endurance event is a long time. So you're going to have to put in a lot of work. It's, making sure you don't have any of these imbalances, but your system's never going to be perfect. Like she said, your system's never going to be perfect, but you have to put in a lot of time to making sure that you're making that imperfect system perfect for what you want to do. And that was like a big relief. And I think why I've done pretty well. So I was hearing all these other guys being like, you literally can't do that. Like your body's not built for it. And then she came along and was like, no, you can do it. You're just going to have to do all of these other things to make it work.
Nice. Well, it's always good to have someone on your team. Hashtag build different. All right. So that's the physical side, mental side. I mean, apart from the fact that you are mental for wanting to do that, 100Ks on a tread out, honestly, couldn't think of anything worse. Yes, I mean, ideally you would have been out in the wilderness, probably battling the sun, which would be a totally different issue. But, let's talk about the mental side of things. What was going through your head for all of those 100 kilometers on a treadmill?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess the mental side of it is the interesting thing. Like, and that's the first question whenever you say this to anyone, like, oh, I did this, or I'm training for this, or I like running 4 hours every morning and 2 hours. They're like, why do you do that? And it's like hard to explain. I think it's hard to explain without giving like context of like other things. But I guess for that particular 100K, there's something that you do, and I can't remember what the sports psychologist term is, or in my mind, I call it like signposting. And when I say signpost, I think it's called like a cumulative perceived effort or something in sports psychology or something. And that's like if I said, hey, Loz, give me 100 push-ups. And then you're like, okay, like I got to do 100 push-ups. I'm going to break this up into like 10 push-up bits. And that's how I'm going to like mentally get through. I'm going to do 10 and that's 10. Or when I get to 50, that's going to be halfway. And then I'm halfway to 100. But then if I said like, okay, Loz, give me 1,000 push-ups, then like your sign, but your signposting is different, right? Like, so your signposting, you probably break that up into similar like 10 little segment bits, but it's 100, 100 push-ups, 200 push-ups, 300. Like that's similar to what you do with these distances. So like I can go out and run, I don't know, like this morning I did like 16 Ks. Relative effort for the pace that I was doing probably felt similar to the 100K because of how you signpost that in your head, or like how I did. So when you break up the 100K, like the strategy that I had, and it was more for like the mechanics of the actual treadmill, is like every hour it would reset and it would take like 1 minute to reset back. So it was like, that was 1 minute that I could like grab electrolytes, because obviously I'm not going to run in a commercial gym at like a 5-star restaurant in my full, you know, running vest and whatnot, look like a complete nut job. Even though like I did look like a bit of a weirdo, but like you break it up into those hour segments. And I knew that at the pace that I had wanted to run at, I could probably get anywhere between like 11 and 12 Ks in that hour. So that's how I set up this like signposting in my mind. So I knew, okay, if I'm going to start this thing at midnight, which I did, like we had the whole day, we had a team dinner, came in, like drank the water, drank the electrolytes, got my food in, felt good, did everything beforehand. When I was there, it's like, okay, if I'm going to do 100 of these, like 100 kilometers, I've got to do this many hours, like this many hours at this pace. And that's what you like, you set that frame and you set that signpost. So like I could go out, even this morning, I went out for like an hour and a half, but like 45 minutes in, I was a bit like, oh, this is getting a bit dry. And it was only 45 minutes. Whereas like after the first hour of that 100K on the treadie, it wasn't too bad, because it was 1/10 of what I knew I had to do type thing. And so like you don't even think about it, and really until you get to the 5. I remember specifically being at like 5 a.m. and I was like, okay, I'm like, I think I was like 60 Ks in or something, maybe a bit more. And I was like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like I was like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like I wasn't that taxed. And like, it was purely because I signposted these things and broke it up. And it's just like, okay, you do the hour, and then within that hour, you can break it up. And like you always hear people talk about this. Like when you're out on the trails, you do it. If you know the trail well enough, like you can break up like little segments. I know I've got to get to this turn here, or there's this bench or this tree or whatever, or this like water break up here. And that's how you like distance it and you break it. But like on the treadmill, going for time at the same pace, what I was doing is I call them rounds, and like they're 2.5 minute rounds. And I only get to the 2.5 minute rounds when you're really, really deep with the mofo in your head and you're really struggling with him. But I break it up into like 15-minute bits. So you do 15-minute, then you've got like a whole strategy for that 15 minutes. And then you got your next 15 minutes, and bang, that's halfway. Then all of a sudden you're halfway through that hour, then bang, you've got another separate like mental strategy for this one. And then boom, your last 15 minutes. Okay, I'm coming home. I've got a break after this. Let's finish this. And that's what you just rinse and repeat. And that's like one signpost, and boom, you go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. If that makes sense. I know that's like a long.
Well, were you able to kind of maintain that through for the whole 100 Ks? Do you reckon you kind of maintained that 1 hour, like 11 to 12 Ks an hour?
Yeah. So I kept the pace. So I was adamant that I wouldn't drop the pace. Like 1, I was adamant I didn't want to do it because I just wanted to keep the same pace. But like 2, I was still working. Like it was fight day for Volk. Like he had the biggest fight. Sure. Yeah, true. You had that. Like, you had like, I've got to run. He had the biggest fight of his career. Like I'd already pre-made him breakfast and a snack like that he had in his room. But I was like, fuck. I've been here for like since midnight. Like I know he wakes up at this time and he has to eat here. And then I was like, I need to be done by like 11 a.m. so I can get him like other food and stuff ready. So like that was one part of it. But then like I just wanted to keep that pace. But I did really mentally, I did really well up until about 70 Ks is when like your body's sore. Like your body's obviously sore after like 40, 50 Ks. You're going to be pretty sore. Like even you're sore after 10 Ks to an extent. It's just like how you handle that pain. And like you have mental strategies. And one thing I have learned is like pain is definitely something your brain creates. Like it's a safety mechanism that your brain creates Like there's literal pain if you snap something. Like I've done that where you physically snap something, and you do know that pain. That pain is very different to the pain you feel when your mind is trying to convince you to stop and be like, this is silly, you could hurt yourself. Like that's a very different type of pain, and you can manage that. And it's almost like I describe it as like a veil that your brain puts over, and you can rip that veil off, like whether you're using breathing techniques, whether you're using like different like thought patterns or whatever to like get that off. You can rip that off, and you almost go numb. You're hurting after. I was hurting anyway after like 15, 20, and then, but like I wasn't hurting, you know, like, and then it wasn't until I got to about 70 Ks that I was like, okay, my legs are starting to feel it. Like, but then like you can't stay in that train of thought for too long, because like you've got to put your attention elsewhere. Otherwise you get like in these negative loops, and it's like really goes downhill, and they're hard to come back from. Like you naturally go up and down and have to like battle these demons. But when I got to 80 Ks, that's when I hit a real, it wasn't even a physical slump. Like my legs were going, like I knew they were going, I could keep the pace, but I hit a real mental wall, like a real mental, just like, I remember sitting there, it was like, what was it, like 7 a.m. in the morning. I was like, man, why am I doing this? Like the guys think I'm just like running for like 8 hours. They don't know I'm doing the full 100 kilometers. Like they're all asleep anyway. Like they don't even care about this. Like they'll think it's cool, like whatever. Like they're not going to, like, no one's judging you for this. Like you have nothing to prove. You're not in a race. Like you're not like, no one really knows you're out here doing this. Like, what are you doing? And it like really got in this negative pattern. And it was like, well, and it's just building yourself out of that, right? Like, and that's like the cool thing about doing this type of thing is like the way I describe it and the way I talk about it. I know I'm like ranting here, is like I describe the whole thing like when people say, and they're like, hey, like, why do you do this? And I say, always respond with, you get to spend a lot of time with the motherfucker in your mind. And people always look at me and they're like, what does that mean? And it's like, it's not meant to be like some like crazy, like, oh, what the fuck, like motivation. It's not that. It's that, at least when I do it, I feel like the way I like visualize this and the mental strategies I put together is like when I want to say stop and get a drink, or when I'm like, that hurts, or you shouldn't be out here doing this, that to me is that mofo in your head trying to make you stop. It's your brain trying to make you stop. And the way I think of the mofo is that motherfucker in your brain is everything, is the worst parts of you. It's the absolute worst parts of you. It's the bad thing. I think like when I read about this more, and like Carl Jung talks about it, and it's like the shadow and the light that most people have in their body, and like life is about trying to find this balance. Like I think that's how I've like managed to build my mental strategy, is that this guy is the worst part of every part of you. But the way that I think about it is that the more time that you can spend with that guy, the more you understand him, the more you figure all these other things out, and all these other things that, you know, that guy takes over. And whether that's in your personal life, or whether that's in business, or whether that's a problem, that whatever, the more time that you spend with him, the better you get to be able to control him. And you kind of start to understand him a bit more, and you figure out like, okay, what does bring him out and what doesn't bring him out. And something that I've learned, especially at the back end of like that ultra that I did, is like, sometimes you need that motherfucker. Sometimes you don't want to like just suppress him. Like you need him to like come out to like help you get through. And it is like that balance of that light and dark. And I think that's one of the best things about like the mental thing, is like, everyone's like, well, why do you do this? Is like, you want to do it so you get to a point like I got to at that 80 kilometers, where you're like very, very defeated. And like that motherfucker is just telling you like, you're done, like blah, blah, blah. Because once you figure out those mental strategies and you come out the other end of it, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Like, let's figure out this thing, and you problem solve this, and you break it up. Like by the end of it, I was breaking it up into 2.5 minutes into 15-minute stints. That's all I could do. Like my legs could go over, and like I completely abandoned the nutrition and hydration thing just to keep this like mental, like momentum going. But like, and again, like you're not proving it to anyone. Like it's just you, and then whatever these constructs in your mind.
I feel like it would have been harder for you though, Jordi, because I mean, like, you know, you say you're in this hotel gym, like no one even knows you're still running. I mean, if you're actually doing the event in person, you know, you kind of have that little bit of extra adrenaline, because, you know, there's people around you also running with you. There's probably randoms on the side cheering you on, you know, like you've got all those other people out there. Whereas for you in this experience as well, like it was pretty much just you in that gym. So that means like
Yeah.
more time alone, just you and your thoughts. You don't even have any nice trees to distract you. Like for me, I can't run unless it's a nice view. I love being distracted. But for you, it's literally probably you're on this treadmill, you're looking at the same four walls for God knows how many hours. Even, that's just that added kind of mental like slap in the face.
Yeah. Like the thing is like, when you say it out loud and you say it to people, I think it really like it blows their mind, and they're like, holy, like you just ran for 10 hours. But like in my mind, I think like I'm working up to 100 miles. So I've got to do like 60 Ks on top of that, across like these mountains where we climb like crazy elevations. So like in my mind, I'm like, that's not even that bad what I did type thing. And then I think of like crazy stuff like Big's backyard where they run for like 4 days straight, and or like the Barclays or whatever. Like it's just crazy things that people do. But like the one thing that I've like learned to appreciate from this whole thing, it's a mental journey, right? Like your body is so capable of outstanding physical capabilities, and like but it's a weird thing to go through mentally, because all you have to do is just keep going. Like you just have to keep going. Like it's like, again, I'm going to say like I'll preface it like you can't just jump off the couch and run, like say this, like you're going to injure yourself. But once you get to a certain level of conditioning and your body's in it, it is literally just, it's a battle with your mind. And like that person that I've like created, that you have these conversations with, you're just going back and forth with him. And then I think why is it so addictive? And like, again, coming back, like when people are like, why do you get to do this? It's like, because you get to spend so much time with that motherfucker. And like you're such a better person afterwards. That's what I really think it is. Like I've never had a long, hard run or done something like that where I didn't come out of it and I didn't like solve all the immediate issues that I had in the business or with the companies or in my personal life or with relationships or whatever. I always came out of them thinking, okay, like, no, this is good. And like, this is, whether I solve the exact problem, my outlook was always so much more positive on it. So it was almost better. And I think that's what's so addictive about like doing this stuff. And it's weird because you almost have to put yourself through so much suffering to be able to find this and go through this. And I think but the thing is, and what I definitely know is going to be true, is like, I think you just keep finding that cave or whatever, or that person is like, it's never ending. Like the capability is probably far, far, far bigger. Like your box is far bigger than what you think. So like, because I always say, like I have friends and they're like, what the heck? And I always say to them, I held a gun to your head right now and said, Loz, go run 42 kilometers. You would absolutely do it. You would absolutely be able to do it. And it's just like your body would be sore. You would be so fatigued. You'd be tired. You'd be hurting, but your mind would keep you going. Like it's just a crazy exploration of the human mind and human potential.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. And I think, that is, like you said, it's kind of one of the attractions for these kind of ultra endurance sports is, of course, the physical thing and being like, hell yeah, I just did this. But that time you spend in your own head, like that mental toughness is just something else.
Yeah. And it's weird though, because I don't necessarily describe it as like mental toughness now. Like, I don't think it necessarily, like you're not necessarily tough from doing it. Cause like, I don't think you look at, maybe it's me coming from like a fighting background. Like I remember like that morning, like Volk, like said, he was like, man, that's insane. I can't believe like you just did that. And I was like, you're the UFC featherweight world champion. You're like one of the most dominant champions. You're pound for pound number 2. Like what you do is insane. Like you lock yourself in a cage with the most skilled people in the world and punch face with them for 25 minutes. That's insane. Like I'm running like,
Everyone's
yeah, exactly. Right. So I don't think it's like you're not necessarily like mentally tough. I think it's just, and you learn a lot about it, like how your body like responds and like breath work and how important like controlling certain things in your physiology are, and how you can give yourself like a motive boost by like kicking up like your adrenaline or your dopamine or whatever, but then you have to control that and you have to be able to balance like your nervous system properly. I don't think that's like necessarily being tough. I think there's a lot of like just perseverance with it. Like I just think you're probably like mental persistence is what I would say, rather than being like mentally tough.
That's epic. Well, you said you are training now for a 100-mile event. Is that correct? Is that the next?
Yeah, so that's the ultimate goal. So like the ultimate goal is to do 100 miles. So I am gonna do the 100 kilometer on the trails. I think I just love trail running. Like I think
Oh yeah.
most people who get up in the trails, I think running on a treadmill is weird, like you said, because there's really not a lot of stimulation around there, and it is like mentally you have to do some weird things to get through that. But like when you're on a trail, it's awesome. Like even if it sucks, it like you can look around and it's just so beautiful. Like there's nothing better than like looking around and being around, especially like the type of people this sport attracts is like really, really cool as well. Like, and that's something you don't get on a treadmill. Like I noticed, like I turn my phone off for most of it, then like putting my notification on and getting like a ding. And like you're so depleted in your body that like that dopamine rush that you get from getting like a notification, like you feel that rush. And that got me through like one of my 2.5 minute rounds. But like you're constantly getting that when you're on the trails. Like you're constantly seeing, like you're looking at birds or the trees, or like you see someone run past and you're like, hey, whatever, or like, you know, so you've constantly got that motivation. So trail running's a lot funner. But yeah, I'll get a couple of them in, but ultimate goal is work up to a 100-mile race, and then ultimately then, you know, go into the Ironmans and whatnot. I think again, it's like, I don't think it's the physical. I think you could do this for whatever. Like you could, I don't know, like unicycle across Australia or something. Like you could do whatever physical pursuit. I think it's the attraction is what you go through on your mind. I think that's what attracts so many people to do this weird stuff.
Yeah, you bloody group of crazy people, you.
Yeah, I guess.
Alrighty, well, last part of things, given that, you know, nutrition is our specialty, do you think you nailed your nutrition and hydration for this event?
For the most part, yeah. For the most part, yeah. Because it's hard. Like it's really hard. Like, and that's coming from someone who probably does like one of the hardest things in nutrition, like sports nutrition, is like getting combat athletes through the weight making process, like even during a fight camp and navigating that. And then cutting weight is a lot of science. But this is kind of different because it's like, at least with the guys, when they're cutting weight, they're not so much active and there's not like that component of it. I find like fueling for marathons, I don't think is that complicated. Like middle distance stuff is not that complicated. Once you go to like the higher ends of the ultra marathon, one thing I've learned is it gets this interesting game that I'd never understood until I did it, about, okay, how do I fuel their physical while they're going through this mental thing? And this definitely happened to me at the back end of this, because I wouldn't say that I followed all the rules. I don't know how much I necessarily agree with like a lot of the endurance guidelines now that I've done this for like a while, but like I think for me at least, I found out what works. And like I can't really have gels, and I can't really have like a lot of these processed things. Like this just doesn't sit well with my body. Like I need to have like good whole foods and fruits, and like if I'll make like sandwiches with bananas and honey and things like that stuff fits well. And then I can hit those like high carbohydrate amounts. And then especially with like the fluids, like I'm a big sweater and I lose a lot of sodium. So like that was a big struggle for me. But like, again, it's just like what you read in a textbook, train your gut to be able to do it. And when I did this on the treadie for about 80 kilometers, it was good. Like every hour I was hitting like my theoretical max. I didn't go as high as what I don't necessarily think you have to go as high as what they say to do it. And I don't know, like, I think fat plays a bit more role than what it's given credit for in this type of stuff. But I did pretty well with it. Like I felt fueled. I didn't feel as fucked as I was. I didn't feel that bad type thing. Okay. And then like my body felt like well fueled from what I was eating. Nice. I was getting like my electrolytes in, and I was maintaining like a good amount of food. Like I wasn't completely matching my sweat loss by any means, but like I was doing pretty well. Like I was keeping a pretty good pace. Yep. Like for this, like I was doing like, I think it was like 505 like kilometer splits or something like the whole way through. So like I refused to slow down on that.
Yeah.
Then I got to 80 kilometers. And this is what I mean when I talk about balancing the mental with the physical, which is something I didn't really understand, because there was no way during what I had to put myself through mentally in that last 20 kilometers that I could follow that nutrition plan. Like it just was, if I had put the mental energy into following that, I wouldn't have been able to do the last 20 Ks, or I haven't yet figured that out yet. And I think that's something that I never even like considered before I did it, is like, I would just tell people, no, like you got to stop and do this. But if I stopped and drank, it would have thrown off all of these mental strategies that I had going,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been now knowing like, because afterwards I was pretty much for 2.5 hours, I just didn't put any nutrition in my body and I was not good afterwards. Like I was pretty bad afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's like live and learn. But that's one of the biggest learnings on that is like, yeah, you can get your food and your nutrition in up until a point. But when you have to like really turn on that mental machine, like I haven't yet figured it out. And like you constantly hear stories of people like who do these like crazy long events and this happens to them and like they can just push for so much longer without that like with these nutrients. So maybe it's you need to figure out how you dial it back. Maybe you dilute certain things. Maybe you load up so much in these hours, but then these hours you bring everything down. So I haven't quite mastered that one yet. But again, like that's nothing. I've never read that anywhere. Like I've never read that in a book. Like, and I tried. Like I definitely tried looking for all this information. Like I tried talking to other dietitians that like are kind of in that space, and I guess it's just one of those things that you learn from doing. But I'd probably give myself out of 10. Like I'd give myself like a 6.5. Like I'd give myself an 8.
Room for improvement.
Yeah, 8 out of 10 up until the 80 Ks. And then the last 20 Ks, I give myself like 2 out of 10.
Oh.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
I mean, that's a cool thing, I think, with, just endurance nutrition in general. It is really cool. And, there's all these numbers out there, all these like amounts of carbs and electrolytes that you should aim for every hour. But like, that's just the theoretical, like the reality is, you're going to have those mental barriers. You're going to feel like shit. Like there's so many other factors that kind of dictate, okay, this is what the book says, this is what the literature says. And I think for you, having that firsthand experience is not only going to be awesome for you moving forward with future endeavors, but also, guiding athletes and guiding clients through similar experiences, because you realize, okay, I'm going to be telling this guy to have X amount of carbs at this point in the race, and they're going to start feeling like shit. So here are strategies that we can overcome these things.
Yeah, for sure. And like, it's a whole nother thing that I think it opened up to me is, like I said, I don't necessarily think at that point that you're fueling the physical. I think your strategy comes to how do you fuel that mental. And I think that's like a very cool, interesting. And I think you see that in ultra endurance, because more so than any other part of sports nutrition or even general nutrition, these guys are torn. Like at the top end, like the top athletes in this, like one of them is a complete plant-based, like vegan. The other one is complete like carnivore keto type thing. And then like the other one is just like eat every carb in sight, eat heaps of candies, drink beer and whatever. And they're like the top level athletes. So it's like, well, what works? Like, what is the best approach and strategy? And well, maybe it's not so much that we need to follow these guidelines. Maybe you follow them up to a point, and then once you get to this other point, you figure out how do you not so much follow the physical guidelines, but how do you fuel that mental push for that last bit they've got to do to take themselves home.
For sure. No, that's pretty cool. And I mean, again, it comes back to saying with the running, oh my God, these guys are going so fast, blah, blah, blah. Just because this guy's eating this and this chick's following that diet doesn't mean that's the right thing for you. So again, it comes back to, of course, this is what the literature says, this is what the top dogs are doing, but like what's actually going to work best for me and my body in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one thing, like the training has taught me, I guess, so much is like, I knew this a lot for like when I was like competitive in jiu-jitsu and martial arts and whatnot. Like nutrition is super, super important. It is, but like training is king, right? Like your nutrition is a strategy to help your training. And so I don't necessarily think that like someone can come up to someone else and say, hey, like this is what I'm doing, or this is what the textbook says, when that person is like absolutely crushing it in their training. Like they've figured out what is working for them and fueling them enough to be able to do that training, and I think it's important, like sports and performance is not health, right? Like what that person is doing may not be the healthiest, but it's helping them. But I think like, especially when you get to like ultra endurance events, I like that there has to be like a crossover between health and performance, because if you're going to go out and you're going to train for 4 days, you can't live on gels for 4 days. Like you need to and if you're going to do this stuff frequently, like if you're going to spend 30 hours of your week training doing this stuff, you can't be living off like gummy bears and snakes and things like that. Like you need to have like a bit more of a holistic approach, which is a whole nother topic we could talk about. But yeah, it's very interesting.
That's our next podcast topic then.
Yeah, agreed. Let's do it.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I think, obviously you've got the physical, you've got the mental side, you've got the nutrition side. I think one last point before we wrap this up is, did I or did I not see you on IV fluids after that 100K?
You did. I did put myself on IV fluids because I guess I definitely felt like I needed them. It was more so for the work. I knew I could have orally rehydrated, but again, like people always ask, like, oh, why'd you push yourself so hard to do it? It was like probably didn't need the IV fluids, but like again, I was with one of my biggest clients. It was just in hindsight, it's probably one of this a bit more of a stupider thing that I've done. Embedded, like I had to feed him, and I was like, I didn't have like 4 hours more to orally rehydrate myself when I was already having gut issues and whatnot. So it's like, I already knew, like, okay, and like, I don't know, hydration's kind of my thing. So it's like, if you can't get it through that digestive tract, just put it in the IV space, like there. And it was cool. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that it, you know, I felt a lot better. Like I was feeling kind of better when I got to the IV clinic anyway, like just from orally rehydrating, but I'm glad I did it because I had to boot back there and like cook dinner and do all these other things. And then you have to like engage in a conversation with this athlete about his like pre-fight nutrition before he does like the biggest fight of his life. So it's like, I'm glad I'm glad I wasn't like completely messed up and like kind of not on the ball for that, because I obviously got a good result. And if it went any other way, I'd always be like, oh fuck, you know, like how much did I play a role in that by not doing this and whatnot? So yeah, that was probably a bit too selfish of me to do that on Volk's fight day, but Volk was good about
thankfully it all worked out. You got your 100Ks in. Alex, he won. So I think great news all round. Really couldn't have gone any better.
Couldn't have gone any better.
But yeah, I think my advice for you next event is try and do it when you don't have that, you know, that added stress of like, shit, I've got to cook some brekkie after this.
You know what the worst part? I don't want to drag this out too much, but the worst part is the sleep deprivation, which is a whole another thing on itself. And I'll say this quickly just so people have like an idea, because when I came home, I had like a 30-hour commute and I slept 90% of it. And the reason I slept 90% of it is because we had our weight cuts on that Thursday night. Yep. So on the Thursday night, we started weight cutting. Weigh-ins were Friday at 9 a.m. So we finished weight cutting about midnight, started again at 5. So I had to clean the room, go back in early, prep. So I had probably had like 3 hours sleep overnight Thursday night. And then on Friday, Alex weighed in and I was refueling him all day. And then by the time it got to nighttime, we have a like annual, like not annual, but like every time they fight, we have a team dinner. So we went out from like 8 till 10 p.m. So like I was up all of Thursday, then up all of Friday at the team dinner. And then so like I got back to my room at 10 o'clock and then I was like, well, I'm not going to sleep for like an hour and then get up. So I was just like, started doing like my mobility and like what I do to like get ready for this and start packing everything. And then so I started at midnight and then went for like another, like ran for 10 hours, did this. And then I had to like obviously get Volk's food ready the next day, went and did all of that. And then like booted out, got the IV fluids in so I could just be like, it was a lot of it was like sleep deprivation, like making me less functional. So I was like, I can't be dehydrated on top of this. So I booted the IV fluids in and then we went to the fights. And this is the real kicker, is because we're on the East Coast, we have to do the fights in line with Vegas. So Volk went on to fight. The main card started at midnight. So Sunday morning, Volk went on to fight at like 1 a.m. and we didn't end up leaving the arena until like 3 o'clock, got back to the hotel at 3:30. I had to be on a 6 a.m. shuttle to go to the airport. So I had like 1.5 hours of lay down, close your eyes. And then I started like the 30-hour commute back home. So it was like
hell, to be honest.
Yeah, like out of all of that was hard.
Years of your life from that experience.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is like everyone's like, oh, it was 100K hard. I was like, yeah, like it was hard, but like it wasn't as hard as like staying awake at the back end of the fights or whatever. Like I'm trying to like support Alex, and you're just like, I'm so tired. But obviously then I like went to the airports and had to commute home and I just slept most of it. But that was like an experience in itself, that level of sleep deprivation.
Yeah, that's insane. And I feel like it can only get better conditions for you moving into your next ultra endurance event.
yeah, that was a bit of a rough one around the edges, but maybe I'll hire a dietitian if you're free, Loz.
Yeah, you on board. I'll give you mates rates or something.
We don't do mates rates at TFD.
Oh, okay, well I take it back. I'll charge you a premium then.
Yeah.
No, sounds good. Well, thanks for chatting to me and thanks for being a guest on your own podcast.
Yeah, the hostess with the mostest. That was really good. I was really impressed. That was 1,000 times better than the first podcast I ever tried to host.
Oh yeah, well I've always got to try and one up you, Jordi. So I'm glad.
Yeah, that's true. The young bucks are coming for the old bulls.
I'm gonna get you. But yeah, well I reckon one of our next potties we're definitely going to talk about endurance nutrition. I think and delve a little bit more into that space because yeah, it is super interesting. And yeah, of course the literature says this, but you know the realities of it all. So I think yeah, a couple of good potties on the way as well in that area.
All right, agreed. All right, everyone. I think that's we'll wrap up the pod there. So until next time, if you've got any questions or you want to hear about any of those stories or dive into anything a bit more, Loz, I'll get you to give your Instagram. You can obviously follow the team at _Fight Dietitian if you want to ask us any questions. And Loz,
yeah,
throw around your handle so they can message you if they want to get any questions as well.
Time at the Expert Dietitian, you will find me there. So until next time, I'm out. Jordi's out. Peace out. We're done.
We're done.